There we go. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where everybody's coming from. I am Brian. This is Melissa. That's Desiree, depending on how you have your screens organized. This is a great session of Revit Radio where you ask all your Revit questions and we kind of give you answers. They might not be good, they might be horrible, but we'll give you some answers nonetheless. And we do have the chat pod open, so feel free to heckle us, say good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever you want to say, where you're from. Also, feel free to heckle us in there if we give completely horrible ideas. And then the other thing is, if you are going to ask a question, please put that in the question and answer pod, because as the chat starts rolling in, it's hard to keep track of questions. They usually just disappear. But on the question and answer pod, it's much easier for us to take care of those. So as usual, I always like to start off with something small at the beginning. And since I had to deal with it twice this week, it kind of popped into my brain that I wanted to talk a little bit about adaptive components. I think Tom or somebody asked about this a couple sessions ago. I was like, hey, what are some good uses of adaptive components? Also wanted to talk a lot about adaptive components and the fact that when I create them, I often don't do them the same as like a normal family. So normal families, we're going to draw reference planes. We're going to put dimensions to those reference planes, right? We're going to do all of the dimensions to do the constraining. Yet if I look at this adaptive component I have on the screen, you're not going to see a single dimension on here controlling anything. Because what I end up doing is hosting points on reference lines and points on points and controlling all of those objects with what's going on. So just going to come over here off to the side and kind of mimic what's going on over here, but I'm just going to go draw a reference line. And then one thing I always like to point out is when you've drawn a reference line is you can host a reference point onto a reference line as long as you are set up to draw on face and not draw on work plane. Also, the 3D snapping comes into play when you're doing this as well. So if you're drawing reference lines, you're going to want 3D snapping turned on to snap to other points. Otherwise, if you're just drawing reference points, you don't have to worry about that 3D snapping. But one thing I always like to show people is when you start looking at this, if you put a reference point hosting it to a reference line, that reference point is then going to give you options for what's going on with this point. You could have normalized curve parameters, segment lengths, non-segment lengths, whatever, all these different options. And one of the things that's really great is using this normalized curve parameter. So what it's going to do is it's going to give you a value between 0 and 1, basically saying where am I located on my host object, that reference line. So if I were to come in here and say, no, go to 0.5, right, that's going to be halfway, 50% of the way through a line. If I just come in here and say, no, 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 go to 0.25 and say enter, it's going to now be a quarter of the way across the line. And as that line grows longer or shorter, that's going to adjust staying at that same rationale. So this tool becomes very, very critical when you're looking at it. Also, when you look at that point, you're going to see that it says I'm going from the beginning or the end. So I could switch it from one side of the line to the other. So those values are going to be reporting or being able to be controlled via that. You will then see you have a value to come over here and say, no, I want to parameterize this. So I could actually give it a parameter. And now that parameter, whatever its value is set to, is going to go from either that beginning or that end based off of the value you have set up there. Okay. The other thing, like I said before, is you can switch that from a normalized curve parameter to something like segment length. So if you're like, no, 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 I always wanted to be a given distance from the beginning, the end, whatever you want to do in there, you can go through and start doing it as a length value. So the reason I start showing this is when I come back here and really start looking at my families and I start coming in here and playing, that when I go back here and look at this family, the reason why you're not seeing any of those values on here is I hosted this point onto the reference line. So this point, you can see it's got a normalized curve parameter, and where that point is located has been set up to be there. I also like to label all of my points. So you're going to see that this one's called host point at number 2 for the end, right? So that's my host point at number 2. The reason why I name all of these points is because I also then like to host points onto points. So if I come in here and grab this point, it's going to tell me, oh, its point is the end point. So this is being referenced on something else. And you'll see I'll call this one the end center line. Because the other thing that you can start to do is then host points on other points. So if I wanted to come draw a reference point on this one, depending on if I wanted it to go up, down, right, left, forward, or backwards, I can set the work plane of each point because each point has 4 different work planes. You can see my reference line is twisted here, but you get the point. So I go vertical to this, I could go horizontal that way, horizontal this way, whatever I want to do. Once I set that work plane up, God dang it, I missed the point button. Escape out of that. Once I set that point up, now what's great about this is it's going to come in here and allow me to select that point, which is hosted on the other point, and I can now play with the offset value. Cool, I wanted to go offset that 3 inches, whatever I wanted to do. And you'll see, depending on which side you had as the host, it's going to go ahead and offset that up. Again, I probably should have chosen my work plane before I drew this line, but you get the point. So when we start looking at this and we start getting into that, that's what I end up doing here. So I always put what I call a control point on here. And the only reason I do this is I never, ever want to host a point to an adaptive point or anything to the adaptive point other than a reference line, because the adaptive points rotate based upon their host. And therefore, you could start getting the whole thing to rotate weird if you're hosting to the adaptive point. So I come through here, I do points on points on points. So if you can start to look at this, I then went through and came in and started adding things like, gee, I wanted to offset this to the left. So when I do that, this point here was associated to that point. That point's associated to this point. These 2 points are associated to that point. So again, no parameters on here, but I'm just using the offset values of all of those. The reason why this point is hosted to this point is because what if I wanted this to be short of my adaptive components? Or what if I wanted this to be large of my adaptive component? So I wanted it to come out past that adaptive component where I clicked it. I can do that as well. So when we start talking adaptive families, there are a lot of people say they're so frustrating. I struggle with these a lot. That's because you've got to rethink different thought processes and don't think about drawing reference planes and dimensioning the reference planes. You start hosting points on points and points on lines and other points on lines, etc. And what made me spark this interest is somebody went online and somebody was talking about curtain panel by patterns, and they were doing a perforated metal panel, and they went and drew like 100 voids into a panel. They were not parametric in any way, shape, or form. And if the curtain panel started to adjust, which my client found out, the voids weren't moving, etc. So in this particular case, we created a panel, but rather than modeling it with voids, I put a whole bunch of adaptive components and adaptive points in here, put those points in there, drew reference lines, and then went through and created the solid from that. So the nice part is if I were to come up here and change this curtain panel to be a different size, you're going to see that this is going to stay centered. These are all going to adjust, and it's fully parametric because I went through and adjusted this all using the adaptive points and points on lines. I'll go hide the surface, right? The only thing you will see in this particular one is similar to anything else in Revit. If I wanted to control the radius of an arc, I do have to do that with the dimension and control that with the dimension. So everything else is going to be set up and being hosted. So if we start looking at this, like there's this point in the middle that is hosted on this reference line and the intersection of this reference line. So as the length changes, this is hosted to be centered, right? Normalized curve parameter 0.5. And then this is hosted on this line at the intersection of this line. So if I were to come in here and grab this one point and change it to be like, oh, let me go to 0.25 on this one, this is going to adjust. This is going to stay at that center because hosted points have the capability to be hosted at an intersection as well. Okay, so we've got that going. The other thing that's cool is once that happens is then I've got this point at that intersection. This point in the center here and here are hosted off that point, as well as this point here and here. All right, so this point's hosted off of here and here. So they're all being controlled by this one single reference point. So the other cool thing you can do is if I take that reference point and rotate it, I can actually start getting this like void or this what I use for a void to be rotating sideways on this as well. So you could start not only using those points to control it, but you can also start controlling the rotation angles of those points. And if everything's hosted off of that point, then everything else goes along for the ride. So again, you'll start to see it gets, some of my families get really complicated. There's no dimensions on them, but it's points on lines, points on points, and then reference lines drawn to start creating those extrusions. Question I saw come up, so the points can have more than one host? No. But if I just, I want to do this again. I'm just going to come in here and draw a reference line real quick. Reference line, I'm going to pick from here to here. I'm not going to parameterize that in any way. So when I do host a reference point on something, reference point, come on, no, not model point, reference point, and I place it on here, and I go back and select that reference point, one of the options you get is hosted at an intersection. So it's hosted by this, but then the other one can also say, cool, do wherever that intersection goes. So again, if I come back here and grab this one and move it back to 0.5, then it's going to move that one with it. So points can only have a single host, but they can also understand that there is an intersection as well. And these don't even technically have to be, if this point moved down, it's hosted. But if I had taken this point and moved it down, even though these aren't touching, it will still find that intersection, even those objects aren't hosted together. So not going to go too in depth into these, but it is one of those things that I did want to say, you know, there's a lot of case uses for this. I know Tom asked a few times ago about, hey, how do you do with adaptive components? What are some of those things? This is another one, like I said, oops, that I just created. I wanted to restore, not go to a different one. So this is one of those ones that, yeah, this was set up to be just that perforated panel. We then hosted this onto a surface. And then on that surface, we hosted it too. We divided it by like 6 by 6. And now they literally had a perforated metal panel. Oh, I got a rotation on there still. They then had their perforated metal panel, which is truly being modeled without a crap ton of voids slowing your project down.
Oh, come on, voids are the best.
Oh, another follow-up, can you specify which intersection if there are multiple intersections? No, it's hosted on the one and you can choose one intersection to go into. You could grab it and say, pick a new intersection, but you can't have 3 lines where they would intersect because they don't intersect, so it's not technically an intersection. I mean, if they did, it would, but then just having one is fine. So, you know, this was a family, and actually Desiree actually used this family on one of her projects because this is one where we were trying to quickly go in and start modeling, like I think she was modeling a bridge, and we needed to represent structural framing. And the other thing is, everybody's ever used these will find out, like you'll use this same family and host it to a rig, and all of a sudden it'll be like centered, but sometimes it'll flip upside down or it'll rotate, and you're like, what the hell? And that's why in this case over here, I gave myself, I think they were incident, no, they were type-based, but I gave things in here like, oh, I hosted it to this, you know, this surface that I did it to. And all of a sudden it went to the left side. Cool. I can switch it to go to the middle. Oh, no, I needed this one to go to the right. So in Desiree's project, she was duplicating this and she had like an 8 by 8, a 10 by 10. Like you'll see this one like 10 by 10, top center. So this is going to be associated to the top and to the center. So it's kind of when you start getting in there, it's like, oh, okay, what were these doing? And here's a 10 by 10 or 10 by 14, bottom left. So we started getting into these, you could see that, oh, we needed to be able to shift this 90% of the time because adaptive components are odd, and those host components can start twisting and doing different things for you. So this is literally my very simple 2-point, it's a rectangle. You can make the material what you want it to be, but it was like literally just a rectangle to start getting in and hosting it to look like structural framing. So don't see any follow-ups. So that's just kind of something I wanted to point out. Like I said, I do use these often, and if you need to get creating them, stop thinking the old school Revit, hey, reference planes, etc., and start thinking of points on lines. Cool. So what questions have we got, Melissa?
Super exciting. Let's see. We could start with Tom. He said it's more of a tip in a schedule view. If you click on the title, you can insert a row below the title. It's fake info, but I thought it was neat and useful. So Tom, what kind of stuff do you put in your fake info?
Yeah, so I know a lot of my clients, they actually do that same thing. Come on, Revit, catch up. So in a lot of their like schedules, they might have like code information. I don't think I actually have any that are doing this. I do not. So a lot of my clients will actually create a schedule, and in the schedule, they'll, in what Tom's talking about, is in any schedule, you can come up. That's a terrible schedule I chose. We'll actually just go grab
in any schedule, just not the ones you keep opening.
So when you have a schedule and you've got the title up here, in that title, you can come up here and say, hey, I wanted to insert a row below it. So let me go and say I want to insert a row below, and now you've got this up here. So this is where a lot of people will come in and start doing like dummy tables to be able to start filling data out. So you come in here, you can insert a row below and above. It'll give you usually different columns. But if you're like, man, I didn't want those two columns, you can select them and merge them. Oftentimes, if I'm trying to do like a table format, I'll just make this first column really narrow. So then I can do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then have the data rows over here. So you're kind of really getting more like that Excel table thing type of etc. Or like I said, layouts, what you need to do in there. One of the things I find that's very, very frustrating is you'll go to like click in here to do something. And if you don't have borders turned on, you don't see it. So it'll be like going to click in there and you'll do like this and you'll start changing the widths of your borders. And it happens quite a lot when you start getting into there. So it's kind of one of those things was like, oh my goodness, it's cool, but it's also very tedious if you don't have all of the borders turned on. So usually I try to tell people, go into the formatting and have some sort of border documentation in there. I got to turn this. Oh yeah. FYI, if you guys ever want to change, like highlight an entire column like I have done here, or highlight this, or do whatever you want to do, and you're like, why is it grayed out? If you assign a view template to a schedule, you could not change borders, fonts, or anything in the title or in the headers, or you can't highlight columns. Now notice I could come here and say, cool, I wanted to turn the shading to be olive in this column. I can do that now, but I could not do that 2 seconds ago when I had a view template associated to it. So if you have a view template, you can't do that. But if you don't, then you can come up here and be like, cool, yeah, I want to go into the borders. I want to have all of the borders turned on. What are you looking for inside of here? You can add whatever you want to do. Feel free to do that, but you cannot have a view template associated. The other thing that's kind of cool about this, and I laughed, because where I originally used to use this tool, and this was a tip I think I picked up from, I forget who it was. She did like 40 tips, Revit tips in like 30 minutes. And this is the one that I did not know. I used to be like, cool, I don't want this to match the view name. I want to be able to type in my own data here and get it. So what I used to do is insert a row below. And then, like I said, I'd get these things in here. So I grab all of them and I'd hit the merge cells. And then I could type in whatever I wanted, right? I can type that inside of here. And then once I did that, I would come up and grab the original row and delete it. Until somebody in that class said, did you know if you click in a title, you have clear cell up here and that'll clear the data? It's like, shit. But if you want to get the view name back or the project information back or whatever else you want to be looking at, you can come in here to say, cool, I want to actually come in here and grab schedule information. From that schedule information, I want to grab the view name. Or no, maybe I didn't want to pull it from the schedule information. I wanted to grab project information and I'm looking for the building name or the project name or whatever else you want to do. So you can get that live data linked to your project information or your schedule data. Unfortunately, you only get view name, or your schedule name to get that linked. Or if you didn't want it, like I said, you don't have to go through and do the thing I used to do and insert, merge, all that crap. You just literally have the clear cell button up here. So hopefully that clears up. Whoever said that, I forget. Tom said.
That was Tom. Beth was saying you can put project information parameters in your bake line too.
Yep. Yeah, so if you have any, even also custom parameters, if you had them in here, would come up as well. So I haven't found a total use to use a whole lot of the project information. I've had a couple of clients, but yeah, I want to put a couple of them in there, but it's not like every schedule I do, I'm pulling out the project name, but you could. So those values are all there for you as well. Caitlin's like, yeah, I wondered how to get the project data, the view name back if I broke it. Yeah.
That's one of those things that I'll do, and then I will end up Googling it and finding Steve Stafford's blog. And then I'll be like, oh yeah, I did this exact thing last time.
This exact thing last time. Yeah, the clear cell for me was one that I did not know, literally, because I always hate the fact that I see people come over here and have weird names because this is going to be the title on the schedule. So they're like, door legend, and they have window legend. All these legends show up in their schedule all over the place or whatever it is. I'm like, no. I want to put the word code here because that's what I wanted to say. But that's not necessarily what I have the title say. So for me, that's one of the things I often do is go into a lot of my clients' files and rename the views, break what it is up here just by hitting the clear cell and then putting what they wanted in the title. So we can use that to get our schedules grouped a lot more logical than just how you wanted the title to say.
Totally. All right. Okay, I think that's good on schedules.
Oh yeah, somebody said in the chat, how do you add data into the rows? You don't. That's been a wish list item, I think, since Revit version 2. I know it's been out there. I know we've been commenting about it since, I've been on it. That's been over 20 years ago. The other thing is if you are just using this for dumb information up here, the one thing I always suggest, no matter what schedule you go through and create, add a filter. So you're going to actually be filtering out the data you're going to get. I usually come in here and just say, hey, whatever value you grabbed, and usually people will just grab like the comments field. I just say the comments field equals Homer Simpson. Right, or something fun, something somebody's literally never going to type into the comment in the event you ever schedule that element. So I will go in and say, yeah, literally I put Homer Simpson. I have like 20 clients out there, their filters are saying Homer Simpson. So if anybody were ever to put a comment of Homer Simpson in the generic models or whatever you're scheduling, then that one thing would show up. But I think it's highly unlikely anybody would ever do that.
Well, now.
Well, now people are like, ooh, Homer Simpson.
Let's see. Let's see. How about a material question from Chris?
Oh, wait, I like this thing from Ian in the comments.
Oh, okay.
We have a floor. Oh, so that's interesting. But does that work in every header? Okay, now I got to see what
Yeah, now we're playing with that.
now I got to just see I don't really have anything. I probably have something under wall
So
scheduling.
Ian's comment is we have a workflow of using our template, then turning it off and changing all the text styles to our bold header style, then selecting all and turning off bold in the font button. That turns off the bold in all the text except for the headers. And that's how we get the headers to be bold.
If I said, well, wait, let me cancel this first. So then come in here and let's go to formatting. That's in a schedule. Let me go edit the view template. So cool. Let me just come down here and appearance. Let's just go through and say we're going to use, why schedule default in here? Header values. I just want to see if this will work. Okay. Cool. Header values. Then you're saying you turn off the schedule template. And then you come down here and go, but I don't get the font. So I guess I'm kind of missing this. How about that turns off the bold and alt text except for the headers. So when I try to select all this, it doesn't give me the fonts. You only get the fonts, up in these headers. I guess I'm confused because in these headers, you can just go say, make them bold or underlined. But I wanted these headers. I guess that's where I was confused. Oh, I don't have headers in there. God dang it. But you don't get it down here. So I don't know. Oh, so you're doing this. And then you go to the font. And let's just change the color.
So pretty.
I guess I don't know, Ian. Might have to have you do some sort of a cancel. Might have to have you do some sort of a turn off bold in the font. But okay, so I got to go make my font bold. So I got to figure out which font I have that's bold. Let me go to my annotate. Go to text. We'll grab the one that was called schedule default, which I don't know why that's in here. And we'll make it black and bold. And then we'll go into the formatting and say, cool, sorry, appearance, not formatting. And use schedule default. So now they're all bold. And then you just do this and uncheck bold. And then you can come back. I'm confused. I don't know. I'm not understanding it, so add groups. Oh, up here grouping. Come on, Revit. group those. The one I'm looking for is what I really wanted to do, and this is going to be a terrible example to this, but I want these headers to be bold. And yeah, it's okay, Ian. I wanted all these headers to be, and they still are bold. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. Those are bold. Sweet. So as long as the font was bold, then you select all and unbold it. There you go. That deserves a blog post. Because then I can come back up here and make these ones just bold where you would want them anyway. Interesting. Cool. See, I've been lying to everybody. Well, I haven't been lying. I told everybody, not to my knowledge, can you make that bold? Does that also then work for counts? So if you were in there and you had calculate totals on any of these, sorry, sorting and grouping. If you had the footer turned on with whatever, it's also going to make those bold. It is bold. Damn it. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's more than, yeah, gold. Beth's like gold star. Yeah, no, that's more than a gold star. That's great because I've been, for years, this has been a question when people came up, how do you make that bold as opposed to the values?
Yeah, I gave him a golf clap also.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm gonna put a blank line so it's easier to see. That's very interesting. So then the values are actually grayed out. Nice. So bold everything, select that all up here, unbold it, because it doesn't select the headers, then come back up here and rebold all this. But if you do that in the template, then you should be fine. Interesting.
Nice.
If I came back to formatting, and if I came back to the formatting, and I said, sorry, appearance, and then I said, cool, I'm gonna have to play with this because this is great. I want the header text to be whatever. That does change it all. Cool. That is great. So we're done. That's it. That was worth the whole show right there. Just being able to know how to bold those. Yeah, that's great. That's a big deal, Ian. Oh yeah, Ian will definitely get credit in the blog post. Cool. So what else we got, Melissa?
All right. Well, and now everything's going to be anticlimactic, I guess. Sorry, everyone else. So Chris had a question on material alignment in families. So is there a stable way to manage material alignment in families, especially with nested families, such as lap siding pattern starting location in elevation?
Kind of. So as we all know, when you get into a project, and if your wall has a hatch pattern on it, because it's a system family, you can tab select, get the hatch pattern. You can use the align command. You can use the rotate command. You can do whatever you want for that hatch pattern to be adjusted. You cannot do that on a loaded family. So if I were to come in here and say, cool, the leaf finish is going to be some sort of tile or brick or something that has a hatch pattern. Go in here, change my finish interiors so I can find them easier. What do I have that as a hatch pattern? Tile one. Okay. You cannot tab select from a loadable family to get that material to be where you want it to be. Does not let you do it. I also literally found out yesterday too, because I was really going crazy, that did you know if you pin, I don't know if you guys knew this, but if you pin a wall, you then cannot tab, so you can get the hatch pattern, but you can try to rotate and stuff and nothing happens. You can try to align it, because I was like, oh, let me just align it. And I'm like, align, let me grab the hatch pattern, let me grab this. I can't even tab select to get the align to work. So if a wall is pinned, you can't move the hatch pattern. Literally learned that yesterday. If it's a loadable family, you also cannot adjust that hatch pattern within the project environment. So what I mean by that is in the project environment, you can't do it, but you can still open the family and adjust it in that family. And so why I'm saying this is I am a little bit OCD for those of you who've worked with me before. What I was driving crazy is in my millwork family for the doors, right? I modeled my styles independent of my rails. I went through and I do the same thing for like a lot of my millwork families, because I know if I'm doing a style and rail type door, cabinet door or whatever, those are going to be different grain directions. This one, I want the grain direction going that way. This one, I want the grain direction going that way, etc. In the family environment, you can go through and rotate and align those hatch patterns. So I came in and created a material in all of my families. No manage. In all of my projects, I have a material called directional display. And it's literally a hatch pattern. I don't think I purged it out of here. Directional display. And it's usually a hatch pattern. Then I come in here and I literally put in like a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch hatch pattern to this, right? Okay. Directional display. So I don't have to, and I'll go back into my create parameters. I will go into my panel finish. I will go into the door finish, and it's already got directional display. Why are my hatch patterns not lining up? Did I make them too big? Manage materials. Directional display. Oh, I thought I clicked on it. Did I miss it? There we go. So I literally went into all of these, tab selected, or use the align command to rotate these, right? You'll see that I'm even going to see in grain on the top. I'm going to see grain over here. So that way, when I'm starting to look into those families, I am going to get a better rendering, right? A lot of people will come in and just model this as one extrusion with a hole in the middle. I model them all as independent extrusions for that reason exactly. If you had a particular material in mind and you're like, man, I always needed that brick pattern to start at the edge, you can use that align command, grab the edge and align this to there. So therefore, when you're getting into it, it is all going to align up. Like, hey, I needed that to line up right on that edge. Once you load it into the project, no, you are screwed. So if you're like trying to create a panel that's going to look like your brick and insert or something like that, that's cool. But unfortunately, you don't just get that going into there. You have to go through and edit it within your family. So I know Phil Reed's done a post for like Inkscape too, like, oh, I've got to get the fire to look properly. So he creates a hatch pattern, aligns that in the family, and then when he adds in Inkscape the little media to look like fire is going, he's got it aligned properly. So within your family, yes, you can control where the hatch pattern is, but once you go through and load it into a project, you cannot get those hatch patterns to adjust them from the family. So that's why I said yes and no to that question. So hopefully, Chris, that answers your question. Rick came in and said, can you paint the surface and adjust the pattern? I don't know because I never use paint because paint is a horrible tool in my command and my thought. So let's just undo in here. And then let's go see if we did paint that material. Paint. See, I don't even know where the command is. I use it so little. No, it's up here somewhere. Here we go. Paint. Sure, directional display will work. We'll paint this surface, maybe. All right, we'll just go grab the. I hate this tiny dialog box. Come up here. Let's go to interiors. Let's go grab the tile I had. We'll paint this surface. Come on, paint the surface. I can't even paint the surface of this door. Oh yeah, you can't paint family surfaces. So there you go. No, you can't paint it and do that. So thank you, Philip. It's like, I can't paint it. I shouldn't say I never use the paint command. When you're editing a family, you can paint onto the surface of a family the parameter. So like on a lot of my families, I don't think my doors have it, but like in a lot of my door families, the parameter for the door is the material. So the material leaf itself would get hollow metal. And then the paint, you can paint a material parameter in the family environment onto a surface, and therefore it will then put the paint on there. So like for this door leaf family, if I really wanted to do this, and I don't think I did it for the door leaf family, but if I wanted to, I could come in and say, hey, this is going to be a hollow metal door, a wood door, whatever, which is going to be pretty generic. But then you can come in into the family values. You can come in here and say, cool, I want to paint a surface. But notice it'll bring up all those materials as well as your parameters. So if I wanted to do the leaf finish, I could grab that leaf finish and say, cool, I wanted to paint the leaf finish onto all of the surfaces. So the door, if you cut through it, would render out with the hollow metal or the wood material, but then the surface would come in with that painted surface to give you the finish you're looking for. So you can paint parameters, and I will do that in the family environment. I do not always do that. I almost never do that in the project environment.
And
So, and Ian asked the question is that I wish there was a way to show all the way things that are painted. You can't display them in a view, but if you are doing a material takeoff, your material takeoff, there is a parameter. So for show this as, let me come in here to my finish schedule. So in a finish schedule, one of the parameters you can get would be to come in and add the parameter for is paint. So if you grab the, or is painted or whatever it's called, I think it's is. Nope. Paint. Material as paint. So you can come in here and say as painted, you can add that to your parameter list. And then once you get that over there, that'll be a parameter. So you then could select it in the schedule, go say highlight and model. Actually, you don't get highlight and model. I don't think you do with materials paint, but yeah, you do. You can say highlight and model, and then you could go through and do that. So if you did a material takeoff, material as paint is one of the values you can bring in. So therefore you could see which ones are painted and then go through and set that up.
so then you could just make it so you weren't sorting at all, just hit all the
Yeah.
as paint stuff and then go to make yourself a view.
No sorting, go in, make yourself the view, it'll go in, you'll click it and you'll be like, oh, okay. And you could also filter that out too. So you can create, I have for some of my clients who go paint crazy. Then you can come in here and say, cool, I just wanted to sort it as a material as paint equals yes. And now only the scheduled things are going to show up or anything that's been painted. So it's also a nice quick way to QA if anybody's using painted materials if your policy is don't ever use it.
There you go.
Yeah, and where I've really used the paint parameter is I've done a lot of like crazy precast things, and then the reveals of the precast, they want them to be like black. I didn't want to do 5 different extrusions in this crazy precast thing. It's like, oh, there's 6 reveals. So I literally just painted the parameter on the bottom, the middle, and the top edge of that reveal, and went through and did it that way too. So like I said, I do use the material as paint. In family environment, I just almost never use it in the project environment because inevitably in a project, somebody's like, well, I changed this wall from tile to wood and it's still showing up as tile because somebody painted tile over tile or something stupid. I literally had one client, they went in the entire one room, a new kid, painted all the materials, and somebody's like, okay, now you got to switch those floors. And so we had to go remove all the paint. Yeah, it was a big deal. Yeah, Photoshop time 5 years ago on a precast job. Yep. Okay, so what's the next question?
All right, let's see. Some materials. Well, we might as well keep rolling with Chris. So for roof fascias, is there a good way to create fascias more realistically to real world construction? I'm having issues with plumb cut fascias that should be under the roof sheathing, not in front. So it's creating a horizontal ledge at the top of the fascia that some of my designers are having a lot of heartburn with.
So in that case, Chris, no. If you really are really trying to say, hey, I'm coming in to create this and put this roof fascia underneath that, you're going to actually be modeling multiple roofs. You're going to be modeling a roof that is just the sheathing, and then you're going to be modeling a roof that is actually the structure below if you wanted to do that, or if not, then you'd be going in and putting it underneath there. So if I do come in and put a roof fascia in here, see, do I have one that's just sheathing? Yeah, wood sheathing. So if I did have this as like my roof that was wood sheathing, right? Or even if this was my roof that wasn't just sheathing and I had other materials on it, right, that might be below the sheathing, etc. So if that's the case, then when you're doing your fascia, you just need to, like I said, probably do it as more than one roof. But when you are doing the fascia, you could pick that bottom edge as opposed to the top edge. And then obviously, depending where your profile is, but you also have the profile offset too. So if I went a negative 3/4 of an inch, I could start to pull that underneath where it needed to go. So trying to get that to look a little bit more realistic, you can do that. But if you're like, oh, I've got one roof that's showing a layer for the structure and a layer for the sheathing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, no. Although I do know on the Revit roadmap, they are talking about adding in multiple layered are real layered objects for walls, floors, roofs, and ceilings, where you can actually have an assembly of all of these and then start to pull these things out independently. So not sure, how that would work. The other thing you could possibly do too, and I have never done this with a roof, but you could create parts out of the roof. So you could then go edit the parts for just the sheathing layer and extend it past as well. So if they're really butthurt about that and they want to see, oh, the it's got to be correct. My only suggestion would be try using parts. I've not done parts on a roof yet, and start pulling those layers out to get where you want it to be over that. My personal opinion is like it's something like this, I just do it as multiple things. I copy to the clipboard, I change, paste same place, I change it to be the different roof, I move it up or down slightly, and now I've got the different layer for that roof. But no, not really.
So that's either your heartburn or their heartburn. All right, well, that was okay. Back to some family stuff. So Ben is asking, what's the best way to create a family for making slab opening covers that will cut a recess in a slab to a depth and have structural angles that I can change the size depending on opening, that can be selected from the angle family to be used as a hardened edge and have a void to cut full depth of slab into pit. Yeah.
So when you start getting into something like that, it's going to be creating a family, and I don't have one that's exactly what you're looking for, but I have something. So you're going to have to go create a family that has a void in it, right? So you're going to be creating a floor base. If it's always going to be in your floors, you're going to be creating a floor-based family, and rather than using an opening, you're going to be going through there and using a void, right? I don't think it's loaded into here. No. So once you get that void inside of there, you can obviously parameterize the void on how deep you want the void to be. Once you nest in those structural families, this is where it gets weird, because structural families, the out of the box ones, are line based, and trying to nest in line based families can be kind of a pain in the ass. So where do I got this? Oh, it's not under openings. Where is it? Oh, I'm in the out of the box. Go to my folder. I'm like, where are all my openings? What did I do? The generic model, opening, recess. I could probably call it reveal. Yeah, where is it? Recess with panel. So like in this case, and I use this quite often, oftentimes I get people who'll be like, that's cool. I need to go in and I want to show, inside of here, I want to put a recess into this wall, but I also need to then show the gypsum board. So I'm doing a recess, I want to see the gypsum board. So this family gives me, what's the elevation, what's going inside of here, but I then also have a material for that panel. Right. So if you're talking, I needed to do something like this, you could have a void. It gives you the depth you want, right? I've got the depth, the width, the length, the depth, etc. How thick is the panel? And then it must be an instance-based property. And then what is my material for this? Yeah, so my panel material. So you could go through and set something up like that. Now, when you nest those structural components into it, that's where it becomes a pain, because a line-based family trying to be nested in doesn't like to control its constraints properly, because it's a two-pick family. So honest truth for me, I have non-line based versions of a lot of the structural components. Definitely like my structural columns, I have that, because I nest those structural columns like wood columns into like an opening, etc. And they just have the same type names as my other families. I just might have one called, it's just like single click or whatever I've called it. So I could nest those into other things, but they still have the same type name. So therefore, if I'm trying to do material takeoff or a schedule, I can see the material takeoff of the schedule. So it's the same, still using the length parameter, still going through all of that, but that's what I'm going through to do it. So that's where it's going to be really hard to be able to do that. Now, as for changing the type of that angled family, it's not going to be different than any other family. Is you're going to have to create a family type parameter. In this case, this is the one for doors, right? If I wanted to change this out from flush to a glazing, it's going to be the same thing. So you could put that family inside of there, make that it work with a family type parameter, so you could swap out the angles. There's no way that's going to be able to make sure that those angles, if you change it from a 3x3 to a 12x12, that adjusts anything in the openings, unfortunately. Like a lookup table doesn't even work for that, because you're pulling data from the family, nested family, and pushing it into the project or into the other family. So that doesn't work. It is a manual process. If you change the 12 by 12s and that's got to fix something else, you would have to do that also. So it's kind of one of those things where you get into, it kind of works, but definitely not probably the way you want it to work. So hopefully, yep, it says, of course, hopefully that answers your questions, but I guess it does.
And Jason's saying he's never been able to get those family type parameters included in a type catalog. Have you?
Family type parameters to be included in the type catalog. I don't know if I know what that means. Oh, family types in a type catalog. No, that's a known limitation. So if you're creating this and you're like, oh, I want to have a type catalog that loads the different leaves on this, I think it is. Let me look. No, you can do that because I have that in these. Let me go look because I'm pretty sure my opening families pull in the different leaf types. So if I go here, and I go into openings or casework, I guess I had a shit ton of catalogs there. Door single. Come on. Leaf thickness, inset. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I'm lying to you. I thought I had them in there.
Yeah, I'm trying. I think I've got all my CTC stuff turned off right now. But
Oh yeah, no, I have to
there
manually.
was something that let you export out the extra ones.
Yeah,
Maybe
I know I can do it. I just thought that one had it. Let me go to I know which one will have it. My door. This one. This one should have it. 8 inches clearance and frame type. Yeah, so you can still do nested types inside of there. Yes, I have to come through here and manually put in what I wanted those frame types to be. But yeah, you can do nested family types as a parameter. You just have to make sure if you're trying to do that, that one of those family types reside within the family, which you would have to have anyway for that parameter to exist. So never mind.
So I was actually just thinking back to Ben's question. Instead of actually nesting in the structural angle, do you think you could just do it as a profile using?
You could just sweep your profile on there, but if you're looking like, hey, I want to see what my structural families are that I'm using in this project schedule wise, you'd have to nest in a structural family. And again, the line-based ones don't really work that well. I've got it to work before, but it was a whole lot of hoopla and it broke in one of the upgrade versions. So now I'm just like, screw it. I have one where it's not 2-click. There's just a length value in there. Oh, and then his question also was there a way to get the corners mitered? No.
Oh, ha ha ha. Unless you do just a profile and have that as one sweep.
Yeah. Cool. So what's the next question?
Get to choose your own adventure. Which heartburn do you want? No writers or no? No structural family or no?
Just wanting the world.
Wanting everything. That's true. Like when the factory asks, well, do you want this? Would you like this? Would you like that? Yes. We just
like this or this? Yes.
What parameters would you use? Yes.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. Tim's asking, what are the best practices for working in a work shared model with multiple users with design options? Users are asked to relinquish frequently. It seems that has been reported in Ideas Forum, but Autodesk has not addressed this yet.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way that works is when you check out a design option, it's similar to a group. You take ownership of that design option and everything inside of it. So if you go edit a design option, you now own that design option and every single thing inside of it. So only one user at a time can work in it. That's just the limitation. That's the world we live in. So we have to know that, and we just have to use communication to start telling people, cool, if you edit a design option, you're done. Make sure you synchronize. So if somebody else sees that design option I need to get into, or send, a Teams message out to everybody in there, hey, I'm editing design option X. If you need anything, let me know, and they can tweak it for you. But that is just a limitation of design options groups as well. That once you edit that group, you take ownership of that group. And even just like Just like when you close it, when you finish editing a group or you finish editing that design option, you are the owner, so you have to go synchronize to give up your rights to that. And I think that's usually the bigger problem is somebody edits it, then they continue to work on everything else, and nobody even goes in and says, "Cool, I'm done. Let me go synchronize." So those are the things that I know when I go into clients' files and I tweak their groups or tweak their design options, I'm instantly hitting synchronize because I know I've taken ownership of everything. And some of my clients do giant design options, like an entire floor of a building can be a design option. I want to make sure I give that up for them. So yeah, it's a limitation. Just know what you need to do. And yes, sorry, Dan. I mean, you don't have to talk to the coworkers. You just have to Teams them. We all have Teams now. You can just, virtually talk to them.
You don't have to see them face to face. I don't know, or you could just get coworkers you like.
Yeah, millennials use text messaging. Yeah, and a lot of offices are not allowed because then if you legally have something hit you up, you don't have a backup of the text message. So most of the firms I work with, texting is not allowed because they need to have the backup of Teams of what was said.
Yeah,
Maybe they're saying no, only use text messaging, so there is no backup. We don't want to be held liable. Cool. So what's our next question? And I do have a couple that got emailed to me that we'll hit up when we're done with these.
Oh, okay. So, well, we'll roll with Dan because now he's so sad having to talk to people. But it says area plans versus regular plans. Why would you want to use one or the other? What are your favorite uses for area plans?
So area plans are when you need to start going in and calculating areas. Like area plans, the out of the box version is, hey, I just need to get a global, an overall
Gross.
gross, thank you, a gross area volume of each floor. So I need to go into a gross area. I do a gross area plan, and boom, it's going to calculate it to the exterior walls, etc. The other time that this is very useful is if you're using BOMA calcs. So, and which is built into Revit. Most people don't know this, but BOMA calcs are actually built into Revit. So if you were to come down here and start looking at area plans, when you grab an area, every area, the very last property of that area is what is this area type? These come into what are using BOMA calc. So if you do a lot of BOMA calculations, you do a lot of commercial spaces, BOMA is pre-built into Revit. So if you say this is an office area versus a building common area, Revit is going to move that line from the center line of the wall to the face of the wall based on BOMA calculation rules and what you do here. So if you are doing this for BOMA, it's actually going to figure that out. You go start setting up what those BOMA types are. It'll set it up. It'll move those area boundary lines automatically for you, assuming when you drew those area boundary lines, you actually went through and used the pick option with apply rules. So I'm just going to draw some walls here real quick. I'm going to throw a couple areas in here to show you what I mean.
And I'll just throw in, it's been a few years since I, sat down with an interiors team that was in-house. But when we actually did and went through the BOMA book, it wasn't calculating things correctly at that point. So we tended to not like to use the automatic rules. We had everybody actually sketch their areas out.
Oh, that's funny because I have a client, I had like three clients who did all they did was BOMA calcs, and they're like, "This is great. It does it all for us. We get this figured out." They loved it, but somebody gonna come here
I think
for an
it was
area.
storefront. It like didn't quite. There was some weird.
Oh, at storefronts, yes, at storefronts that is true.
Yeah, one of those. It's automated, but check.
So when I come up here and grab the area boundary, what I was talking about is it defaults to the pick lines tool, and it defaults leaving this apply area rules turned on, right? So when this apply area rules is turned on and you start picking these areas here, boom, 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 right? And then I'm just going to come in and put a couple areas. I hate that this is a drop down. I do area plans once. I do areas 500 times. Why is that a drop down? Sorry. So then when I come back in here, you can see that this line is centered on that area right now, right? But if I were to come in here and say, okay, cool, this is going to be a major vertical penetration, right? Everybody pays for the major vertical penetration. You'll see that it'll automatically move that over to that major vertical penetration. So it can set up those rules for you. I only have a few clients who do BOMA, so where it really, really, really starts coming into play is what you can see here, and I believe what Rick said is building code. right? So Revit will give us the area of a room, but if we were calculating the area of 5 offices that were 101 square feet, Revit would round each one of those offices up to 2, saying I need 2 people. But if I do an area encompassing all 5 of those offices, it's going to come up and say I need 5.5 people. It's going to round it up to, I can round it up to 6. So really where most of my clients are using this is all of the occupancy things for all your occupant load factors, plumbing fixtures, all of those things. So we started going, so you can go through and set up. And that's really, I see the most common use of the area plans. I do see people use it for gross building to get a quick calculation, but most of it's going to be the building code analysis.
Yeah.
So I don't know, how else do you guys use it, Melissa?
Yeah, it's a lot for code things, for multifamily, doing, chunks of.
No, that's an interesting comment Dan put on there. They use area plans to start justifying the square foot on their drawings, so they know how much to bill out, etc. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
But just like Ian was saying, we've actually got a few clients where they are putting floors inside of a group in order to pull that around and get square footage from that too. So
Yeah. And Sarah says she doesn't use the apply rules. The reason I like the apply rules the most is because, when the walls move, it starts then, hey, I'm going to move the area boundary line with it. If you had just picked the line and the wall moves, it doesn't go through. And more often than not, I start seeing clients who, they go back to their code plan or they go back to their BOMA plan and like there's all these lines random all over the place because, they didn't move with the walls. So that's kind of one of the big things for me is it doesn't, most people are like, yeah, we just don't use it. But then I see their code plans are always screwed up. So I think that covers why you would use area plans. Ironically, I use area plans and structure a lot of times just to quickly start throwing in areas for like, oh, what would the possible load or what would the weight here be or how big is the square footage of this? I often use area plans and structure just to quickly give those things. Just go draw some area lines and, oh, cool, here's roughly the space you have for all the engineers.
yeah. Yeah, we would do tenant plans sometimes too to say this is area for tenant one, so you can kind of get the overall. Yeah, I'm with Sarah. If you could define your own rules, then we'd go for it. But
Yeah, but could you imagine that conditional statement, right? Because you've got a priority over the different rules, right? So if this is next to this, then it stays in the center. But if this is next to that, then it moves to the inside. But if this is next to that, then it moves to the outside. I mean, that's
yeah,
probably
which is why
behind the
we just
scenes
draw them.
a fairly large conditional statement. I have a lot of clients, even when they do the code, they just use it because they're kind of like really in majority of what we do, especially clients who do giant buildings. They're like, I don't care if that's to one side of the wall of the area. I know we've got gross versus net. I don't care. I want it to move with the walls. And that's just what they do. They're like, if I move it from this side to that side, it's still balancing out usually in the occupants. And it's just, they did one project where they went through and drew them all. I'm like, and then they did another area type where they didn't do it. And they're like, we were off by 2 people out of thousands. I'm okay with that. You can align and constrain. So if I just use the pick lines tool, sure. And I went to go do my my area boundary line. And I was on the pick lines tool. If I don't say apply area rules, I can use the lock command. But again, now you're introducing a constraint, and the more constraints you have, the slower Revit becomes. So sure, I could do that and have it be constrained to that side so it moves. But I've also seen people then go to join a wall into this or do something else. And it's like, oh, constraint's not satisfied. They're like, what constraints? I can't move it because there's a constraint. And it's because there's an area line constraint to it. So yes, you can, and depending on the size of your building, that might be a completely valid thing to do. Yeah,
right.
they're also not phasable, just like rooms. Check with the move by near elements, and it'll then move with the room or with the wall. Yeah, that scares me. That command scares me. I've used that before, and then I've moved a cabinet, and all of a sudden walls start moving with a cabinet or other things. So I can honestly say I almost never use this command. I don't know, to use that command, Melissa?
Very rarely.
Yeah, I don't because I've seen like I've done this before in things and been like, oh, let me move this, and then I see weird things moving and like, huh, yeah, no thanks. I'd rather be in control what moves with what, but not let Revit just decide.
We've all been hurt. All of us are like gun shy with everything. I don't know. There's that time.
Scary command. Yeah, Tim's like scary
The
command.
one time it exploded everything.
I honestly forgot that tool was there until that was just mentioned.
I do have to say the rules thing where the area boundaries just kind of fly off to wherever and just stick into things, that drives me nuts too.
Also
But
blows me away that areas can
yeah,
be like up to a foot away half the time before it actually comes in and says, hey, I mean, everything else in Revit's got to be cleaned pretty and nice,
uh-huh.
but not that. It's just like, really?
Yeah,
Really?
no, that's just like, eh.
Of course, as I say that, I can't get it to work, but there we go. Yeah, I've never understood why they don't have to connect, but cool. So what's our last question?
Oh, well, now we have a couple, so take that. Rick was asking your thoughts on ACC Bridge. Are any of your clients using it? Pros, cons? Anybody here using it
I have several clients
successfully?
using Bridge. A couple reasons. I have one client with a structural engineer, so they're using obviously Autodesk Construction Cloud, and the structural engineer wanted to host everything on their own hub and use Bridge, and we're kind of like, no, because then we're relying on you to publish. But what we ended up doing is setting up Bridge, so every time they publish on the architect's model, Bridge puts it over into their hub, and then they're using their Forge tools on the stuff over there. So they wanted to be able to do it on their own. I'm like, yeah, we're not going to allow that because then we've got to wait for you to publish and it's, whatever, because that particular client does all live linking. And once they did that, then I was like, cool, we use we use Bridge for it to live push over to there. So they hit publish, it gives them new files on their end. And on their end, once those files are updated, then they run their Forge tools on it. Works great for that. I have another client using with the contractor. So the contractor, they've done a bridge to the contractor. So every time the architects and engineers and everybody on the design side publishes, it automatically creates the files for the contractor. So they don't have to go download them and rerun them through Navisworks. They just automatically get it. The other reason I have a client doing it is they had an old project done in Revit 20 and they're going through and getting all the construction done and it's almost done, but they're now doing an add-in or a remodel to that project. So it's not like a remodel. I think you're adding a whole nother wing to the building or something. So they literally have done bridge from the old 2020 project into Revit 24. So they just keep publishing over here when things change for RFIs or whatever, constructability issues. And when they do that, now they're getting it back up on 2024, and now they have it in 24, getting that Revit file coming in. So it was very interesting to be able to see it to do that as well. So yeah, I have seen it, works well. A little bit weird to set up when you start getting into trying to get it set up to the first time. It's a little confusing in my brain, but once we got it set up, it was pretty fun.
Oh, yes, and if you didn't see Tim saying they use it because it's great, you don't have to constantly be adding other firms' users to your stuff.
Oh, so Jason said, so it upgrades the models of their different versions. No, you're just seeing the published version of it. I think they're actually using the, on that particular project, I think they're using, what is it called? The construction to coordination model. So the ones that are old, they're using coordination model, but they know that one's going to be updated without having to go publish it, download it, update it, do whatever they want to do.
Nice. Oh, I like Dan's comment. That's what controlled work sharing should have been. Yeah. But now we're done. Now we're publishing. Now you do.
Cool. So we had a couple more pop up. I think we got time for them.
We did.
At least I do.
All right, let's see. Well, we can go in order then. So Ben saying, does anyone else have a problem with the dim style that is imperial and metric stacked? And the stack, if the dimension is vertical, is jumbled on one side of the dimension line.
I do not have that problem. I don't have imperial versus metric, but I know my working dimension style, I have decimal inches below. So like here, I've got the decimal inches below the feet and inches. So that way I can make sure I'm going out to, 10 decimal places of accuracy. And I have not seen this ever get jumbled. And I've been doing this for years. So I don't know if it's different if it's metric versus imperial, but I don't get this at all.
Is it maybe a very
So
small dimension or something? Like, Yeah, because we have our check one where it's like the bottom dimensions a foot long, but
Yeah, but I have it suppressing those
okay.
numbers if it's not there. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I do same thing. And maybe it's a font issue. So I don't know what font you're using, Ben. Maybe just try changing the font and see if that fixes it. Oh, yes, I agree with Beth, what she just said.
Mm. Is that the turn it off and turn it back on again thing?
Dan, there's
It's the equivalent to that.
Arial narrow. No, that's what this one is. So I don't get why
Oh,
you're having that problem, Ben. I don't
well,
know.
go change it to metric.
Change it to
Come on,
metric.
prove it. There's a font
I
other
got
than
nothing for
Arial.
you, Ben. I have not
Yes,
seen it. I'm
Dan,
not
Comic
saying it doesn't
Sans.
exist. I haven't seen it.
Yep, it's Arial or Comic Sans. Those are your choices. Let's see.
What's the next one we got?
Okay, Chris is saying, what's the best place to start with a basic clash detection? Do you go straight to Navisworks?
Personally for me, the best place to start for clash detection is model coordination if you're using Autodesk Construction Cloud. So for me, when I get into there, I have clients where I set this up on every single project. So what I mean by that is if you're using Autodesk Docs anyway, you can come in here to model coordination. And model coordination is what I call a design team's clash detection. It's not nearly going to give you the control of what Navisworks has, but for design team members, this becomes really, really critical. Now, the way I personally set this up, again, is I don't want to have to rely on, I don't use the publish consume, so all the models don't go to a single folder. So what I do is in my architectural model, I have a view that's set up for just communication devices, just electrical devices, just fire protection, just mechanical diffusers, etc. So literally in the VG, I've got all the linked models in there. I turn only on the one link I want to see. And then once I start going through that one link, I can be like, cool, now I only like for my mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And this one, I only see mechanical diffusers and flex duct, right? Because I don't want to run clashes all the time, because otherwise every diffuser would clash with the ceiling and I have hundreds of ducts. But now I can come in here and say, oh, why are these diffusers clashing with the electrical? And again, once the views are set up in Revit, all I have to do is publish, and this is all automated. Happens the second I hit, well, not the second, hours after I hit publish and it goes through the process, it does this all for me. So then I can start coming through and literally start looking like, oh, look, I'm comparing diffusers to electrical. Well, cool. You guys put whatever that is right there on top of what I'm looking at. So that is the diffuser
Every time.
clashing with, expand. That is a diffuser clashing with a light sensor. You could probably do that, but not good practices. And this is just automated. And then any team member I add to the construction cloud, I add every single one of these, every single member to model coordination. So every person who's part of construction cloud can come in here and look. This particular client now sets up at the beginning and says, look, it's up to you guys to come through here and do this. If I start creating issues and assigning them to you, that's a bad thing. And it's been working pretty well for them. Most of their consultants are going in and on their own and coming in here and finding this. So one of the part of the BIM coordination meeting is they call them out saying, hey, look, electrical guys, you haven't really coordinated. Let's go through and get that up. Right. And it's really cool. And you look on here, you've got this nice little tree form. Again, it's however you set the views up in your model. It does clash view to view. So if you don't set up views, it's going to clash your entire model. So BIM 360 has this as well, Chris. BIM 360 and ACC. But so if you're not doing this, you have all these clashes. So you'll start to see in my Revit files, I have all these different things. I have just structural columns versus structural foundations versus structural framing. Or then I have the overall structural model if I need to. So that's how I go through and start setting this up so I can really start seeing, okay, why do we have mechanical equipment clashing with the architect? No. Oh, the plumbing. Why do we have mechanical equipment crashing with something else, right? So we can start coming through here and really looking on what's going on with that. Cool. We've got mechanical and structural issues here. And again, like I said, this is clash detection for the design team. These are simple design issues that we really should be looking into. It's not Navisworks. And it's all automated. I don't have to spend days upon days in Navisworks going through setting it up. And again, everyone has rights to this. So it's not like I have to go create a report. I mean, you can come in here and click on these things and say it's an issue or it's not an issue, and you can start cleaning them up. But it's like, we're all design team. Part of our job is to make a coordinated model. This is obviously not coordinated.
Yes, and Dan's pointing out that you can have the views and publish settings all set up in your template, so you don't do that every time, which is definitely helpful.
No, I did not say that. Yeah, so if you're in Revit, I can't do it now because this is not a collaborated model, but in here you would have published settings. So in the published settings, you would have this, and in those published settings, you would say, hey, which views do I want to be published? And you can create different published settings, by the way, too. So you can create one just for model coordination, as well as one for sheets, as well as one for other views. And you can toggle on more than one published setting to be published when you hit it. So I have clients will do all their sheets and they're all separate published settings, so they don't have to try to keep track of them all in a single. Yeah, you can still click it.
Push the button.
Yeah, you can still set it up, but it's not gonna do anything because I can't publish anything. And this particular template does not have it, but cool. I got all these people coming in. We're gonna have to put a call it on these because technically I'm 15 minutes late to a meeting, but I told them I'd be late. So unfortunately, all these other ones came in that we, after 2 o'clock technically. So keep those for next time. The only one I did want to get to, since Ben did email it to me, he had 2 quick ones on here. What are some of the add-ins that I use and what are the workflows? And I literally opened up Revit 23 for this. One of the best add-ins that I have that I don't use often, but when I use it, I use the crap out of it, and that is Hatch Kit. If you need to go create a hatch that is a simple tile pattern, and I know PyRevit has one, but I can literally come in here to the quick fill and I can create a like brick or a CMU or a tiled hatch pattern in seconds. I can't even draw the lines as fast as when I get into PyRevit to do this. The other tool that I have also here is View Filter Manager. This is like $100. I think Hatch Kit was like $100. View Filter Manager, I actually got this one because Melissa and Aaron suggested it. Allows you to take views or filters or templates and push all of the tools to each other. This one is a great tool I use all of the time. I am a big fan of the Ideate tools. So I have a lot of the Ideate tools. For me as a BIM manager, I live daily in Style Manager. I don't think I'm ever not in Style Manager on a day that happens. Go through those ones a lot. So yeah, those are probably my favorite. If I did more work on projects, and I don't see it up here, I don't have it up in that one. I have it in 24. I use a lot of the Revolution design tools, especially if you do keynoting. The Keynote Manager is just a no-brainer. If you need to link views from one project to another, or in your text box, the I forget what it's called. The auto link is huge. I also love his simple tools for dimensions. Hey, I want all of these dimensions to say verify in field. Cool, I've got all these inside of here pre-set up, minimum, maximum. Cool, let me grab that one and tell this dimension to say that. You can just have it so you're not constantly adding dimensions. The Revolution design tools are great as well. I don't use as much as those because I don't do a lot of real project work, but so there's a ton of them out there and everybody's got the ones they have. The CTC tools are cool. I just think they're too expensive for what they are. I mean, I know there's times where I've used them and like, oh my God, this is saving me hundreds of hours, but it's a pretty expensive tool. So I always try to go for the ones that I get. DI Roots tools aren't bad. I oftentimes disable DI Roots tools because they will tremendously slow Revit down. So DI Roots is one of those ones that I don't use that often. I usually have it disabled. It's probably disabled in my 23. Kobe Toolkit's pretty cool. It's got some ones. The one I love most about the Kobe tools is they basically have Excel Lite for Revit. So you can come in here, get the values, change it without ever leaving Revit and be done. Yeah, it does great. And then they have the multiple type editor, which I love this too. Grab a whole bunch of types, change the type value all at the same time. I use those 2 tools quite often in there. And like I said, 90% of these things I have like room to floor. We have the same thing in the Revolution design tools. Renumber, I have 15 programs that do renumber. So you just got to get the ones that you're used to and get set up. And then favorite new trick or improvement Ben had in recent Revit releases. I think my favorite in the recent Revit releases is the shaded lines in a schedule and being able to zoom in and out of schedules. I think that's my favorite. One of my favorite tools.
Helps a ton.
It does. I mean, it sounds so stupid. One of those little we'll go to this one because it's got a lot. One of those little tools, but being able to shade every other row like this and then zooming in and out of schedules to see it, especially when I'm presenting, this is just so nice. But All right.
It
On
probably
that note,
drive them crazy because they put out a big thing and we're all like, eh. And then they put out some little thing like shading a schedule and we're like, yes, finally.
yeah, exactly. But yay, that's so simple. And freeze the headers and print the
Yes,
those
yeah, we're
headers.
like
Seems to
celebrating.
be.
And they're like, but we also redid this whole thing. Meh.
Yeah, I don't
We
care.
worked around that forever. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sweet. I have a non-capitalized one there.
Oh,
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to end it. I will try to get this recording posted, and we have to give a shout out to Ian for the best tip of this entire Revit radio. So thanks for that, Ian. I always love it when other people share and I learn something in whenever I'm presenting. So thanks, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you all next month.